how many of you are familiar with the Venus Project? Okay. I'll go through it briefly to give you an idea of what we're working towards. We feel that the way the world is going today is completely downhill, that our language was designed hundreds of years ago, and we really talk at each other than to one another. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the proposals of the Venus Project. If I fail to answer your questions, you have to let me know that. Raise your hand and say, you didn't answer my question. Don't be polite. If there's anything you don't understand, question it. It's up to you now. Okay, now these are the assumptions we make. That you will have war, poverty, depression continuously until all the nations of the world are brought together and the earth is used as a common heritage of all the world's people. If you don't understand that, if you think that money is the only thing which you're brought up to believe in this culture, if you're stranded on an island with $10 million and there's no water, no fish, no arable land, you have nothing. Money is a nothing thing. It never did represent the physical entities that enable us to live. Politicians, all of them, can do nothing to make the world a better place. They do not understand technology. And they do not understand what to do. All nations are going downhill now. This is the first time in history that there's been wars all over the world and we've had unemployment. War has always been big business. Get that through your head. It's not to bring democracy to other countries. It's to exploit them, use them in whatever way we can. I want to try to get that across to you. Let's assume that you are drafted into the Army. You put up your life to defend the country. If that's true, then we should draft all the war industries so no one makes a buck out of war, and it's real. If you draft all industries so they get the same basis of pay as the soldiers that put their lives up to defend this country, it's real. But if people make millions of dollars selling machine guns, submarines, aircraft, it's not real. It's big business. Now, there's a book written called Arms and the Man. Did anyone ever hear of it? That's amazing. A friend of mine was a pilot in World War I. He flew over German munition dump called I.J. Farben and had orders not to bomb it. He didn't know why. He said he flew over 8 times with strict orders not to bomb it. After the war, he found out why. DuPont had holdings in I.J. Farben, an American company. Now, of course, another aspect of war. We've been killing Japanese soldiers in the South Pacific Islands in World War II. The truth is, Alexander P.D. Seversky of Seversky Aircraft Company said that what we needed at that time was long-range bombers to knock out the power projects in Germany, the dams, the electric generators, and shut down the factories. But if you shoot soldiers on every island in trenches, has nothing to do with bringing war to an end. War has always been big business, loaded with lies and deceptions. Now, how many Americans knew that American soldiers used to cut off Japanese ears and make necklaces of them? One person, amazing. The book is called A New American History. If you really want to know where we're at, we're in the same case as all other nations, corrupt as hell. The Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara, their writers said that this is the most corrupt country in the world. Now, what does that mean exactly? That means that according to Charles A. Lindbergh, his father advocated that the government print money and make it available to people, not private banks. Private banks are permitted to lend out money more than they have. They can lend out more and collect interest on it. Well, that's utterly corrupt. If you don't understand that, we always had wars, recession, boom, bust, and what they do in our school books, our history books in particular, do not describe our country as it was or as it is. All history books and all the people back in our history books always did the right thing. They never made any mistakes. They never made any errors trying to, your history book, everybody says the right thing. There's no such people. That's all over the world. Where do you think we got this land from? We took it by force and violence from the Indians. Then we took California, New Mexico. After we stole all the land we needed, they put up the sign, "Thou shalt not steal." What is true of America is true of all the other countries. When they say the sun never sets on England, how do you think England got all those country controls in the old days? They took it. Now, if they lost, because they would have been called thieves, now they're called conquerors, great conquerors. So, if you understand what I'm talking about, the money system is the greatest fraud ever put forth on people. Think of this now. Today, America has 300 submarines. Each one, not according to me, according to the War Department, has more destructive power than all the wars in history. One submarine. Now, where can you go with that? What can you accomplish? But there's a place for particular senators and government officials. They built a place under a mountain for them to go to in case of nuclear war. Well, there's 6 months' supply of food, water, all the necessities of life. What do you come out to? You ever think of that? A burnt out, radioactive, wasted area? How stupid can you be? The Pentagon is made of people, army people. And army people are notoriously stupid because they're not very well read. They don't understand this. What you'd have in Washington if we had a sane society, meaning mentally sane, you'd have a Pentagon of sociologists, social scientists, who can bridge the difference between nations. Soldiers are killing machines. They're trained to kill. You look at them and say, well, at least they're fighting for our country. No, they're not. They're fighting for oil and they're fighting for economic advantage. I'm sorry to say what I'm saying. I don't like what I'm saying. I wish we were decent folks, but we're not. I don't own any munition companies. I have no political ambitions. I think that politicians say things people like to hear. They have nothing to do with the truth. They don't even know what the truth is. There are some people that I meet that call themselves truth seekers. In order to be a truth seeker, you'd have to know everything to know what the truth is. So there's no such thing. Then there are other people that say man is something more than the sum of his parts. I'm sure you've heard that. So is a can of tomato sauce. So is a clock more than the sum of its parts. So what? Man creates the filth in the atmosphere, pollution of the oceans, the land. Man. Man operates guided missiles. They don't go by themselves. Man builds warships. It's a human being that ultimately drops a bomb on cities and they pin a medal on them. And they put an X on the fuselage for how many villages you bombed out. And people think, well, that's good. At least I'm defending my country. Then there's another group of Americans that think that we used to have a democracy, but the governments of recent times took it away from us. You've never had a democracy. Let me tell you why you've never had a democracy. And let me tell you what I think a true democracy would be. Our president would get up and criticize another country for an hour or an hour and a half. When he's through, we would invite the prime minister of that country on the air to give his side of the view. You know, if you're accused of anything today, you have the right to face your accuser in court. So whenever you criticize another nation, invite them on, give their point of view. Then invite the Prime Minister of Sweden, because they're both full of shit. This is how I see it. This is what I'm talking about. In a democracy, people say, well, at least I'll participate. It's a participatory democracy that I believe in. So I always get those people all the time when I say, do you believe in a participatory democracy? Yes, I do. Did you vote for the space program? Well, I guess not. Did you vote for the Vietnam War? I guess not. Did you vote for the design of the Capitol building or the highways in America? I guess not. What the hell are you participating? What an illusion. And there it is out there all the time, and you think that you participate in selection of politicians. You don't. They're picked for you. If you had a democracy, you'd have 4,000 political parties, and they would disagree and argue with each other. And if you had a democracy, you'd have religion on the all religions on Sunday. Then you'd have atheists and agnostics giving their point of view. That's a democracy. But when you've got generals on the major broadcasting stations and admirals of the Navy and vested interest pitching their pitch for more armament, it's your money that goes into armament. And when you bomb other cities, no matter where they're at, you're building hatred, fueling hatred for the future. And then there's another group of people that think they're smart. They're against abortion. You imagine they'd be against war, because they're killing thousands of people, bombing children, everybody, unborn children, mothers. So what's the matter with these people? Well, I tell you what's the matter. They are cerebral insufficients. They don't have enough stuff up here to put anything together. They even created gods. They used to have many gods in the old days. Then they downsized them, finally come down to one God. Now the Jewish God says, if a man takes your son's eye out, you take his son's eye out. The Christian God says, when a man punches you, turn the other cheek. All these gods are different. So when the guy says, do you believe in God? Which one? Einstein said to me. When I asked him, do you believe in God? He says, which one? There's so many different concepts of God. So many different concepts of right and wrong, good and bad. Now I'll tell you a little bit about right and wrong. And if you're black, listen to me carefully. If you're brought up in the Deep South as a white man, and it's an uneducated region, you will speak with a Southern accent. And you'd say things like, I'm gonna get me a nigger, I'm gonna kick his ass in. Where do you think that comes from? That comes from an environment. That's not that the person is mentally ill. There's nothing wrong with a Southerner or a member of the Ku Klux Klan. That's the environment he was brought up in. And the psychologists today and psychiatrists are so stupid that they deal with the individual. It's really the environment that makes them that way. If you don't understand me, if you were brought up as a little baby or by the headhunters of the Amazon, so let's say you, and if I said to you, doesn't it bother you to have 10 shrunken heads? You might say, yes, my brother has 20. So he would be perfectly well adjusted where he's coming from. There are no good or bad people. There are people brought up in different environments which they believe in. If you're brought up in Nazi Germany as a baby, all you see is Heil Hitler, Deutschland über alles, meaning Germany above all. You're a Nazi if you never see anything. If you still don't understand me, if you take a nice Jewish boy and bring him up in Nazi family, very young, he's a Nazi. You take a Nazi baby, bring him up by a Jewish family, he's a nice Jewish boy. So really, what are people? People cannot think or reason. Let me back that up now so you don't get mad at me. It's very easy to get mad at what I'm saying. The reason we can't think is because we're brought up in a fixed culture with fixed values. When you're very young, they start pumping crap into your head. Who loves you more than anybody in the world? And the baby says, I don't know, your mommy and daddy. What's the greatest country in the world? I don't know, the good old USA. Of course the good old USA. And if you're brought up in Saudi Arabia, you're brought up in Dubai, you're brought up in Germany, same pitch, okay? The only real answer is to declare the earth as the common heritage of all the world's people. and all the resources shared by all the world's people. If you still don't understand that, what we spent in World War II, what we, the Germans, the French, the British, all the money we spent on equipment could have built hospitals all over the world, schools all over the world, wiped out the slums all over the world. How stupid can you be? Now, how many of you ever heard of a book called Mind in the Making by James Harvey Robinson? Not even available in your school library, not one hand. How many of you ever heard of the book called Arms and the Men? It appeared in Fortune magazine explaining the profit system of war. And there was one time even Fortune magazine ran that. And then there's another book called Tyranny of Words by Stuart Chase. How many of you ever heard of that? What happened to these books? There was another book called 100 Million Guinea Pigs. Anybody here ever hear of it? It was a bestseller in America. It attacked the drug industries. They said, why don't the drug industries try to find out about carrot juice or celery juice or natural approaches to disease? Because there's no money in it. You get $3 or $5 for a pill, so why should they? So the public, after that book was a bestseller, demanded that a new agency be provided in Washington called the Pure Food and Drug Administration. Now it's infiltrated by the people of the drug companies. Anybody know that? Amazing. One person, two persons, three persons. So you see, we are not a free country. We never have been. We never had a democracy. In a democracy, where freedom people, they always say that people are born equal. They're not. Some are tall, some are short, some are fat, some are not too good eyesight. We are not born equal. But what they're trying to say is all people should be given an equal opportunity. You can't do that if you give a little girl a doll. You're already programming her. If you tie a big bow in a little girl's hair, you're programming her for a certain role. When my little girl was 5, she says, I want an electric train. I don't want a doll. You give a little girl a washing machine, you are programming her. The reason boys are more inventive than women is not because men are different. It's because men are given a wider range. Let me tell you what I mean by that. If you don't know what that means, which you won't get in your school books. When we were little boys, we used to piss together in the field and cut across one another's piss streams. And another kid said, "Did you ever see a kid take a shit?" He said, "No." "Come on, Billy's going to take a shit, look at once." Here's what they got. The way it came out, this enabled a man to design an extruding machine. You know what that is? A machine that extrudes aluminum. He got it from another kid taking a shit. Now, men, when I was a kid, we used to throw spiders at girls. And you know, the girls would go back like that. Today they collect spiders. But, so you see, if given the same range that men are given, if a man is having an affair with 5 women at the same time, he's called Don Juan. If a girl screws around with 2 guys, she's a tramp. Who wrote the book? The men. So think about it. You're second rate. And so God doesn't hang a picker on a male and say, don't use it until you get married. It would pop out the day you got married. So he got all this bullshit out there, and there's really no such thing as profanity. Because if you bake a pie, I don't know, you drop it, you might say fiddly-dee. If he baked a pie, he might say shit. That means, I'm sorry I dropped a pie. So does fiddly-dee. I'm sorry. There's no bad words. You're brought up in an environment that wants to use that kind of language. When I spoke at Columbia University, they said, do you have to use that kind of language? Would you use that kind of language if your mother was here? So I said, Mother, will you stand up? And she There's no bad language. But what is terrible is prejudice and discrimination. So years ago, this pilot that I was telling you about that flew over German munition plants, he was a member of an organization, thank you, called Technocracy. How many of you ever heard of technocracy? Okay, the technocrats believe in using science and technology rather than politics as a means of governing people. So I attended about 2 or 3 of their meetings, and I enlisted. I joined. I found it pretty good. Then I noticed there were no blacks in the organization. So I walked over to Howard Scott, who was the chief engineer, and I said, how come there's no blacks? He said, let them start their own section. And I said, well, how come there's no Orientals? He said, the Oriental mind can't grasp technology. That was in the old days. So I knew. I tried to tell him that you're looking at the first generation Orientals, but by the 3rd or 4th generation, it'd be just like us. And there'd be no regional dialect. And he said, no, the Oriental mind will never grasp technology. He died a long time ago, and so did his ideas with him. There's nothing the matter with technocracy, except those areas which I couldn't agree with, so I resigned because I could not defend it. So then I said to myself, what is needed? How can you design a society where there's no conflict? Well, there's always been conflict. There's always been corruption in government. There's always been wars, and the Bible says there will always be wars and rumors of wars. And we shall always have the poor amongst us. This is in your Bible. I can't accept that crap. I believe that man makes God in his own image, some jerk that you pray to. And this guy sits on the throne, and he looks down, and he can see everything you're doing, whether you're in this concrete building or anything else. They tell us that God made everything, every galaxy, every universe, every bug, every plant. And then Jesus proceeds to insult it. Just before they crucified him, he looked up and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. If this God created everything, you don't have to tell them. They don't know what they're doing. That's what I mean by an insult. When a farmer says, dear God, we have a drought, my corn is drying up, how about some rain? I'm like, God, gee, thanks for telling me, I didn't think of that. You know, we reduce God to some jackass that gets angry, creates floods, sins, injury, pain. And if you don't follow the Holy Scriptures, you burn eternally. That doesn't sound like God. That sounds like a psychopath. When I tell you God is made in the image of man, you go to different countries, the Indians' concept, happy hunting ground. No Indian pictures stainless steel automobiles. No Eskimo can dream of walking on a palm-fringed beach unless they've seen movies. So it means that you can't think of anything unless it's within the culture that you're brought up in. That's why each little group thinks they're okay. The Nazis used to call themselves the master race. The Jews called it God's chosen people. Well, if you start doing that sort of thing, you're separating people. And when you have women's studies, Polish studies, Jewish studies, black studies, you're separating people. All people need clean air, clean water, arable land, and a relevant education. That means how we depend on the forest. If we dump stuff into the oceans, I better tell you this. About 45 years ago, the U.S. Army, United States Army, dumped 65 tons of nerve gas in Miami. How many of you knew that? Nearly one hand, 2 hands, off the coast of Miami, near the Gulf Stream. How can you love your country and do things like that? Don't you see that? Einstein thought that if he gave them the formula and Oppenheimer for the atom bomb, surely man would be wise enough to demonstrate it out at sea and say to Japan, we don't want to drop it over your country. This is what we can do if you don't drop your arms now. But no, they dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki because they're brought up with the old crap in the Bible that says revenge is sweet. You do things like that, you build hatred for centuries. So I'm trying to tell you things. Sure, I can give a beautiful lecture on God bless America. Who the hell are you to tell God who to bless? If he made everybody and you say God bless America, who are you to do that? Everybody knows what God wants except God. Because man makes God in his own image. A guy that gets angry, creates floods, that's not God. And then I went to another church. I was looking for the truth. in the early days when I didn't know any better. I was looking for the truth. So I went to satanic churches because I wanted to see what they say. They believe that Satan rules the world. There's more evidence to demonstrate that than God. Serial killers, bombs, continuous war, dumping stuff in the ocean, poisoning the atmosphere. They seem to have a chip that sounds right, because I don't buy that crap either. But I'm just telling you what different people believe, and they're just as sincere as you are. The Japanese are brought up with the same values about you as you devise about them. And we talk about Nazis as being cruel. If you get a book by H.G. Wells called Outline of History, in that book he says the U.S. was moving about 1,000 Germans toward the campgrounds, but the German army was catching up with them, so they put them in a big whole machine gun them all. Well, we don't have any real movies on anti-war. Maybe All Quiet on the Western Front or The Vickers. Do you know how many movies were made pro-war? Thousands of them. And I remember the original All Quiet on the Western Front. A British man grabs a barbed wire, he's about to climb over, and a bomb goes off, and it shows two hands on the barbed wire. Well, they never show the horrors of war, because enlistment wouldn't go up. And the boys in the Army, a lot of them think they're defending this country. The only way to defend this country is to build a bridge between nations. So I said to myself years ago, different nations think differently. They have different values. Some of them have 20 wives, and that's normal to that country. So how the hell are you going to bridge the difference between nations? So what I did when I was 21 years old, I attended meetings of the Ku Klux Klan, and I dissolved it in a month and a half. That is in Miami. Then I attended meetings of the White Citizen Council. They hate foreigners. And I dissolved it in 1 month. Then I asked some people in Brooklyn, who are the most backward people in the area? And they said, well, we believe the Arabs are on Atlantic Avenue. I said, what makes you think they're backward? They still believe the earth is flat. So I said, boy, I've got to get to those guys. If I can't get to those guys, how am I going to change the world? So I looked up the guy that was in charge. His name was Elbaz. I called him and I said, can I come and talk to you, Elbaz? He said in this type dialect, he said, from where your father he born? I said, Lebanon. He said, very good, very good. You are Arab? I said, yeah. That means, yes, in Arabic. I'm not an Arab. So he said, come and saw me. That means come and see me. So I came to see him. And he said to me, you believe the world is round? I said, yes. That means in his background, it can't be. So I pointed to his head, showing me how smart he was. He said, if the world is round, man fall me down here. All the water, he fall me down from the world. Do you understand that now? And I figured, boy, I got to get to this guy if I want to change the world. So I put a balloon in his hand, and I rubbed the balloon with fur fast. And I put some cornflakes in his hand and told him to hold it away from the balloon. Okay. And all the cornflakes, when you rub it, you generate static electricity, and all the cornflakes jumped up to the balloon. And he said, world, he magnet? I said, yeah. Ah. He went in the next room and explained that to the Arab. Now look, the average person doesn't like to confront people that think differently than they do. Now you can get along with people who say, look, folks, the earth is a little round and a little flat, and you get along with a lot of people. But that's not the business of science. They used to believe that the stars went around the world, that the world was the center of the universe. And so that was smashed. We still believe in gods and demons. If you go to Mexico, the rooms are at different heights in the middle-class home. And I asked, why do you make all the rooms at a different height? Because the devil doesn't like to walk up or downstairs. He likes to walk on a flat plane. And they believe that with a straight face, just like a Christian does this before he goes off the diving board or into a bullfight. Now try to picture this. In ancient Rome, maybe on Saturday, I'm not sure the day, the whole family would come to see Christians being fed to lions. And the kids would say, Daddy, can we come next week to see Christians being fed the lions? If you behave yourself. So, are these kids insane? No. That was normal to that time. If you're brought up in the Arab world, a man looks at an object like he's not that interested in it. He says, how much you want for that? And he says, $10. I give you $3. Well, that's normal to that country. When the guy comes to Sears, the Arab, he says, how much you want for the clock? Like he's not that interested. The clerk doesn't even know. The clerk picks it up, he says, $8.95. I give you $2. Goddamn foreigners. It's normal for that person where they're coming from to do that. Do you see that? There are no good or bad people. A serial killer is made that way. If he's genetically damaged, he's not responsible. If his brain is warped, he's not responsible. And the psychiatrists work ass backwards. They try to change the person. It's really the culture that fucks people up badly. You understand what I'm saying? The culture. There's no bad words. They're just different expressions. So, all of your congressmen lie. The Democrats lie about the Republicans lie about the Democrats, and even guys like Carl Sagan tried to raise money to communicate with extraterrestrials. They want to build big antennas. If the Democrats can't communicate with the Republicans, and husbands and wives have difficulty communicating, how the hell are they going to communicate with extraterrestrials? Let's assume there were extraterrestrials. Anything that can travel 100 million light years through space is not like us. They don't want to meet your president. The president will be an asshole. He's an ignorant man, Bush and his whole group, very stupid. The Democrats just a little behind. But there's no such thing as intelligent government. Government is managed to keep things the way they are. People are elected to political office not to change things, but to keep things as they are. The same with universities. They depend on funding from big corporations. So guys like me don't get much of a chance to speak to university students. I'm considered not a boat rocker, but a boat sinker. So if you sink the boat, if you speak frankly and the truth, your chance of getting on radio, NBC, CBS, are zero, because they depend on sponsors. When I was on Larry King, I was on 4 times, he said to me, you attack the drug companies, the cigarette companies, the auto companies. I never did attack the auto companies. This is what I said on the Larry King show. I said, if you have an airbag in front of you, it's all right. But if you get hit on the side, your head goes right through the glass. The whole inside has to be an airbag. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. So he said, why don't they do that? I said, Larry, I can't answer that. I can only tell you they don't do it. Then I said, if you don't want war, Larry, you have to bring all the people of the world together. And they don't know how to do that. They want to bring democracy there. You can't bring democracy to a nation that has a different set of values unless they choose it. And how do they choose it? Through education. Can you educate them? Of course not. You can't control people unless you make them pretty much uninformed as best you can. The reason you do that, you can control them. If you teach people to think and reason, you can't, in times of war, get anybody enlist in the army. You can't move people en masse, so you make them all alike. Here's what I mean by that. If we taught history, real history, the new American history, it'd be history of our country, the mistakes we made, the good things we did, that would be for all nations. So people do not always do the right thing. They can't. And so you live in a managed world. And your kids in the future will say to you, wasn't it obvious that you paid off senators, you paid off governors, you paid off different people to get your will? Isn't it obvious? I guess not. And so, if you do away with the money system, you can't have sale of drugs. You can't pay off senators. You can't buy people. You understand what I'm saying? As long as you got money, no matter who you elect, you say, well, maybe if we elect decent people in government, no way. Even if you had the most decent people in the world, taken from the best churches you like. If you ran out of resources, be lying, cheating, killing, stealing. It's resources that people need, not money. Access to resources. Is there anybody who has difficulty with that? So I will just take another drink, if you don't mind. Thank you. So what we advocate then is a resource-based economy, no money. Resources mean, today normal people, normal means screwed up. Normal people say, how much will it cost to build a new city like you have up there? That isn't the question. The real question is, do we have the resources to house everyone on earth, take care of everybody medically and every other? Yes, we do. We have more than enough resources. If you consider the money spent in World War II, we could have wiped out the slums all over the world. Educated people, built the best universities free of charge. Why do we do it free of charge? Because the smarter the kids are, the richer all of us are. Every kid shooting up drugs, hanging out in malls. Why? They have no place to go. There should be art centers, music centers, cultural centers, theater groups where people can go. They hang out in malls and Coke stands because there's no place to go. And the government, I'm going to say this, the government and industry doesn't give a shit about people. Proof now. They would not outsource. If I have a big factory, if I pay my help more than the minimum wage, I can't stay in business. If he outsourced it to China. You understand? You're not going to invest in a company that builds playgrounds for the women's children that work in the factory. You want the money spent on products, advertising, so the income is greater. So you invest that. So we're all sons of bitches in the monetary system. It makes us that way. When I say if you're not, consult your bank account to see who you are. So it's very difficult in a monetary system to be decent or fair. A lawyer is a guy who can take language and do whatever the hell he wants with it. He can, especially if he's a good lawyer. He can make your system sound bad. So in the future, there'll be no lawyers, no bankers, no investment brokers, no one that makes money by not donating service to the country. So the future, you'll have structural engineers, chemical engineers. They don't run the country, by the way. They really deal with problems. That's hard to understand. I'm not talking about a technical elite. I have just as much fear of that of any other system. I'm talking about the intelligent management of the Earth's resources. That's what I'm talking about. So what we have to do first is a global survey of what we have, how much arable land, how many factories we have, how many coal mines, trucks, ships, planes, and by the amount that we have, we can determine, knowing how many cases of cystic fibrosis and all the other physical ills, that tells us how many hospitals we build. Not some jackass saying, I think I'll build a hospital here. It's a good area, good community, and has future potential. No, you do a survey to see what's needed, and you provide for those needs. If you don't do that, you're going to have war and crime continuously. There's a place in Jamaica called Ochos Rios, where 8 rivers come together. And there's so much beautiful drinking water that I've never seen anybody come in during the day or night and steal water. There's so much of it. Now, if people have access to the necessities of life, they do not steal. If people can go to a center like a library and get any book out of the library, you know, before they had the public library, women marched for a public library. And they had rotten eggs thrown at them. And they were beaten up and put in jail. Eventually, they got the library in. The reason that people were against the library, if you made books available free, they felt it would threaten the sales of books in bookstores. But when people read a little book, little bit, they bought more books than ever because they knew more. So I want to build a camera center in every city where any human being go in and check out any kind of camera, just like the library. And any musical instrument. This is love of your country and love of the American people. If they can have access to their needs. But if families, some of them are not educated, They don't know how to feed their children. They feed them junk food, not because they're bad parents, they just don't know. A failure of education. In schools, you should learn how to relate to one another, how to bridge the difference, how to have a different opinion than your best friend and yet not get angry. This is what the future is about. Learning how to share ideas, not ego. Ego is one of the major problems in the world today. Hey, I did this. I can run faster than you. My daddy can beat your daddy. Or I can ride a bike faster and further. That's the ego. When you learn to share ideas, you enhance everyone. When you keep it to yourself, you remain a stupid individual. Now somebody said, well, some people are born with better brains than others, meaning the brain tissue, there's more neurotransmitters. If your brain is better than anybody else's, you become a Nazi faster in a Nazi culture. A good brain has no mechanism of discrimination except experience. Like if you smell a rose, some young lady, and you like it, the next time you see something that looks like a rose, if it got spots on it, black spots, you have a tendency to go. And if it burns your nose for 3 days and your eyes for 3 days, the next flower you see of different pattern, you're going to hold it over here and go, you know, you do this. So they say you've learned. No, your behavior was modified by the pain. Learn is a lousy word designed a long time ago. And we still use those words today. I'll see you at sunup. The sun doesn't come up. The earth rotates in that direction. Remember, our language was designed hundreds of years ago. That makes it almost impossible for us to talk to one another. We talk at each other. Hey, how are you? Nice day. Good to see you. If he says, I'm not too well, I need $2,000 for an operation, can you give it to me? I say, no. Then why do you ask me how I am? What kind of a phony are you? So all this stuff, good morning, how are you, glad to see you, how are the children? All bullshit. Unless you have hospitals, health care for everybody, and everybody is well off, so that doctors don't have to work 18 hours a day, or 10 hours a day. They should work 4 hours a day. And when a new machine comes into a factory, the boss doesn't walk home saying, now you work 4 hours a day, you get a little more pay, and a month vacation. He downsizes. He doesn't need you anymore because the machine does the job. That's why people get mad at machines. They don't serve people. I never read of a machine that